Welcome back. We will move on now to recommendations by committee. First being Safety Committee, Mr. Nicholas Boyle, Chair.
It is recommended the board approve suspending implementation of District Policy 705, pending the resolution to its validity by the Board of Common Pleas of School County.
There's a motion on the floor. Is there a second? Is there a second?
Second.
There's made and seconded. Now, are there any questions or comments?
I want to thank the board for sticking through this long journey. The board has had the foresight to create a policy to allow administrators, teachers, and staff to volunteer as our students' guardians. This month, the Stoneman Douglas Public Safety Commission has recommended arming staff to volunteer. Chapter 1 was provided to the board last week. The report investigates the past 20 years of active shooters. Most of the incidents were stopped by administrators, teachers, and staff. During these events, administrators and teachers are usually the first ones killed shielding their students. This report states that the rapid response by an SRO is insufficient in and of itself. The report states a deputy responding to the building responded in 1 minute 39 seconds after the first shots were fired. By the time he arrived, 21 victims have already been shot. I also want to apologize to the board. Last week I said that I didn't believe we should allow an anti-gun, anti-Second Amendment group from Philadelphia to dictate school board policy. Because if a tragedy would occur, they would tiptoe back down to Philadelphia and we'd be the ones here cleaning up the mess. I was wrong. They'll run down to Borough Hall and demand firearm bans just like they are doing in Pittsburgh. In the past 7 days, they are supporting a ban of the most common rifle owned by American citizens and standard capacity magazines. They are also supporting legislation in the Commonwealth to ban all semi-automatic firearms. But their most appalling attack on the Second Amendment comes from Oregon, where they are sponsoring Senate Bill 501, which allows law-abiding citizens to purchase only 20 rounds of ammunition per month. This goes against the values of this community, who the majority are freedom-loving Americans. My vote will stand as a no.
Any other comments or considerations? I just want to look, Nick. I'm very proud of you that you've put a lot of effort and time into this thing, and I agree in principle certainly and factually with what you stated tonight. My personal feeling is that we need to suspend the implementation, not the substance of 705, but the implementation, pending the outcome of the court decision. We would invest a lot of money in training, a lot of time and effort, perhaps even increase the staff. And I think it's a prudent thing from a fiscal perspective to not implement it or to suspend the implementation at this time. Any other comments? Hearing none, we don't need a roll call. All in favor to suspend the implementation? Aye. Aye.
No.
Opposed? One. You guys have it. Is that the only motion you have? Right. Okay. Auxiliary Committee. Dr. Thomas Roquette is not here. Brian.
It is recommended that the board approve the following for the 2018-19 school year: policies, 2019 band Christmas party, coaches, custodians, and stipends to be determined, contingent upon the submission of the necessary documentation.
Motion's on the floor. There's a motion to forego the reading. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Second. Any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Now on to the next motion. Is there a second to that motion that was just stated? Second. Any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Education Committee, Mrs. Abdul.
It is recommended.
Wait. I apologize. We have number 2, Brian.
It is recommended that the board vote to approve the first reading of policy number 820.
Okay, there's a motion on the floor.
We'll make the motion for the reading.
We forgo the reading. Now, under the question, administration has some information for the board.
Policy 820 was brought forward last week. It's regards to the Safe to Say Something program being put out by the state. After last week's meeting, we were given information from our state organization indicating that instead of putting it into board policy, school districts should be putting it into procedures. So we are asking you to vote no, even though we asked you to vote. It doesn't mean that procedures are going anywhere. It doesn't mean that the philosophies and anything is happening with that. It just means we've been directed that it should not be policy, it should be procedure. So we're asking you to vote no.
Okay, does everybody understand that it came out of committee prior to the advice from the PSBA? And so we are now voting to, well, we didn't vote to suspend the policy. We don't have to vote on it at all.
You just have, you have to vote, this is the, you're voting on the first reading, so we're asking you to vote no to the first reading.
Okay, all right.
So we have to
Everybody-
second to the motion.
That's right. Second to your motion.
Right.
All in favor of Dan's motion, say aye. Aye.
Well, do we have a second after second?
Second.
So, okay, gotcha.
Now, we have a motion on the floor. Is there a second to this motion? Someone?
Second.
Second, okay. All in favor? No. Opposed? Aye. No.
No.
Okay, so,
Yes.
all right. That was awkward.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
That was awkward, but it's recommended, and it, again, we had the information before last week's meeting, we wouldn't have brought it.
All right, thank you, Brian. Education Committee, Mrs. Eileen-Weiser.
It is recommended that the board approve the following for the 2018-2019 school year: policy, internship agreement, letter of linkage, professional substitute teachers, teacher resignation, adjusted date, teacher resignation, days without pay, high school chemistry teacher, contingent upon the submission of the necessary documentation, stipends to be established.
Motion's been made, is there a second?
We make a motion to forego the readings.
Motion to forego the reading, is there a second to that motion? Second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? We forego the reading, now to the motion on the floor. Was that seconded? Is there a second to that? Second, Eileen's motion. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Eileen. Finance Committee, Mr. Dan Shan.
It is recommended that the board approve the following for the 2018-19 school year as presented: tax report, tax refunds, affirmative resolution, clerical substitute, contingent upon submission of the necessary documentation.
The motion's been made, is there a second?
Second.
Made second. Any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Communications, Connie?
I have none tonight.
Payment of monthly board invoices?
Make a motion for the payment of monthly board invoices.
Motion been made, is there a second?
Second.
Made second, any questions? All in favor? Opposed? One abstention. Old business, new business, other business, hearings. Name?
Lisa Baird, Andrews, PA, Three Boys in the District. I am really disappointed with the tone that this has taken from the time it began, which was in the interest of the students and how to best protect them. And I really believed at that time that the board, the administration, had truly believed that this was the best way to protect our students. Maybe misguided, maybe not with all of the resources they could have used at the very beginning by talking to teachers, talking to students, talking to parents. It has gone from that to a Second Amendment push. And I am very disturbed by it. This is not what we need in this community. What we need is policy that's based on the best for our students. That statement proved and showed the true intent of this policy, and it's completely disturbing. I have never been this upset over something like this before, and you all know me. I do not speak out, but this is disturbing. I'm done.
Anyone else?
Tracy Perry, West Penn. After last week's committee meeting, I talked to Mr. Kinder about the recently voting to hold off on the policy until after legal issues are taken care of. I asked Ray if the board was considering or is already in the process of implementing any of the other legal safety measures that the other schools in the area might have done, such as police officers, whether they be retired or active, paid or volunteer, or trained SROs. And he had stated, at least till the end of the year, like to get us through this year until this is dealt with and we can come up with a better policy and the board can come up with a better policy. He stated that they missed the deadlines for grant monies for SROs, and however, I'm thinking, just with the figures, if you had planned on having, say, 12 volunteers at $2,000 a volunteer, plus the added insurance, plus the training and the housing and paying for substitutes, could you not use that money to proceed with trying to go with what Mr. Kinder and your attorney had suggested prior to the implementation or the passing of policy 705 and look for an alternative for at least this year?
So are you suggesting that the $2,000 that would be a staff stipend would go to a part-time police officer or somebody else in the building? Is that what you're suggesting?
Yes. Yeah, if
So
you had
for-
12
so for-
volunteers, that would be
So for
24,000.
5 months, he or she would be working $2,000, is that what you're saying?
Well, no, it would be the $2,000 times the 12 volunteers that you were looking to have.
Right,
I
right,
don't
but
know how
you-
much you put in the budget, but that would be 24,000, plus whatever the training would have cost, the housing for the training, the substitute teachers, like all the money that would have been put in
No,
for.
I understand, yeah, I
To
understand.
go to
because
maybe getting 2 or 3
Considering that
part-time
there was
officers.
16,000 that was donated by a local municipality, that
right.
would offset that, that would be great.
Yeah.
I just don't know how pragmatic it is to suggest that someone is going to work 5 months in that capacity for $2,000.
But there's a lot of people, a lot of state troopers, a lot of police officers that are retired, military that are retired, they have said that they would be willing to do things like this. Other school districts have implemented it. They've had their own police reports, their own police departments, they've had SROs. I'm just asking, are you interested in looking into it? I mean, are you pursuing it?
sure.
Not even just
I
interested, have you
love-
started to pursue it?
Hey, I would love if that process would be implemented tomorrow, absolutely.
So you're going
I just
to
think that
pursue
we're in
it?
Fantasy Island when we think that someone's gonna work in that type of a situation and be trained. This training is intense and it takes a while to do. So even if we implement that, what you're talking about tomorrow, which I have no problem with personally, and I don't know if the board would either, it's a matter of scheduling and a matter of getting it up and running. I don't really know how long it would take to train somebody to the extent that we would want them to be trained to be in our schools armed. So that process, if we started today, is what, January 15th? It may take 1, 2, 3 months, I don't know. But in essence, you're looking to have something immediate, which of course we've done many other things that didn't include staffing at this point.
I'm not looking for immediate, I'm just saying it should be pursued. I mean, if that would have started as soon as this lawsuit got into effect, you might have already been in the process. Because even at the November 7th meeting, when it was the town hall meeting in the cafeteria, the FASTER program, the people who came to speak to you and speak to the community, said that they had no openings for trainings until after the spring. They were full up until spring. So if that's the program that you were looking into, training the people, the staff that you were going to hire as volunteers here in the schools, we technically would not realistically have had even volunteers that are in the district, paid staff, to be carrying and be trained prior to very close to the end of this year.
Right.
So it's isn't it worth it to pursue another avenue until that gets settled?
We are pursuing other avenues. We're pursuing, matter of fact, many of the suggestions that came out in that meeting and other studies that we have looked at, absolutely. And it's I don't want to get confrontational here, but
No.
it seems to me that the most important thing that came out of that meeting was preventative measures, which we are doing. You're trying to now cast to the board that we were dropping the ball somehow by not training somebody immediately and getting them in immediately. We just suspended the implementation of the policy tonight. Up until that time, things were moving forward. So now they aren't moving forward. Now we will wait till the legal process proceeds. And we will also continually look at measures as in reconfiguring entryways to schools that are vulnerable, counseling, all of those other things, including apps, including early warning detection systems, all those things we're looking at. But if you're just looking at throwing stones at us because it didn't happen yesterday, I'm sorry you feel that way.
No, I'm not throwing stones. And when we came here in November and even before that, we did not just talk about preventative measures. We had numerous people that engaged you specific numbers from state police officers, police departments, other school districts. We did suggest pursuing armed SROs and armed police officers. people that were not staff, people that their only job was to protect our children in this manner. It was not just preventative. So for you to say that is upsetting, because that's not true. We have been pursuing this avenue, what I just asked about, long before now. So I'm upset about that. And that's all I have on this one. And then on policy 820 that you discussed last week about the safe to say, what is the difference between it being a procedure or a policy? I just want to know myself.
I'll handle that one. The PSBA basically put out a news brief on it, and it recommended that it be part of an additional policy that we have already in place. I believe it's 806, but don't quote me on that right off the top of my head. So the difference is that really isn't a difference. It's what was recommended by PSBA.
So basically,
It's everything is in implementation. We've already had tips provided. We've already started some of the training processes for our students and staff. We'll be having a community training forthcoming. We have to settle on a date, make sure nothing's going on in our auditorium. But we should have something for the community before the end of January.
Okay. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Name?
Thank you.
I would just like to make the statement that I think that discounting and disrespecting our local police department by claiming the staff training would be better than the local police, or making statements about them publicly, is not helping our cause, and asking or requesting that they perhaps volunteer some extra time to help support the community. Just a statement, Larry.
I won't debate you on the merits, but take exception to it. Anyone else? Okay,
Motion?
second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you all for coming.
Okay, all right, well, the policy was officially suspended, which I believe was the goal of the litigation. So where do you go from here?